East Coast boy from the suburbs travels round the block, surveys his domain, he's just taking stock. I used to live in New England, in a city by the coast. Used to read the New York Times with my coffee and my toast. I used to make a few bad jokes about life in the Midwest. Now I'm here, and I think it's time to give those jokes a rest. 'Cause now I live in Iowa. Oh, it's true, I cannot lie. Part of me has found some peace beneath the prairie sky. But hey now, don't you miss the city? Well, I ain't had time to grieve. Sure don't miss the traffic, and I sure do like to breathe. Like to tell you if I can, ooh, success ain't all it seems. I'm living closer to the land where I've planted all my dreams. Yes, now I live in Iowa. Ooh, I'm glad I made the choice. Heard the music of her soil, and now I've added my voice. We're all where we choose to be, admit it or not. Does it matter anyway? Do we give it another thought? Well, here I am in Iowa. I never would have guessed this sacred space that I call home. It just keeps bringing out my best. Oh, now I live in Iowa. And if you ask me why, I just say take a long, long look at the evening prairie sky. Ooh, now I live in Iowa. Oh, yes, I live in Iowa. We all live in Iowa. I get very few requests other than, could you play farther away? So I will play one song. That we had a request for. I'd like to dedicate this song to Shirley Norway. Oh, Shirley! Hey! It's a song that I wrote for Linda, my very best friend. When I was growing up, I always dreamed I'd find a friend who I could share my secrets with, who'd love me back again. We'd always be connected even when we were apart, who I could take on journeys to the center of my heart. And I found you, and you found me, and you hold my life in yours so easily. You've shown me life is different than the way I lived before. You usher in the sunlight when I leave an open door. To find the joy in simple things, a gift you have that's rare. Wonders that are waiting, only you can take me there. And I found you, and you found me, and you hold my life in yours so easily. You say that you will love me in obscurity and fame. Well, I say that I believe you, though I'm timid just the same. We still have so much to learn, and this is just the start. The lessons are much clearer with your hand upon my heart. We'll travel down 1,000 roads until we have arrived. The years that measure distance show we kept our love alive. For all the celebrations in all the temples of the world, for all the blazing glory of 1,000,000 flags unfurled, for all the clouds of passion that have flown across the sky, for all the years of wisdom in the closing of an eye, I thank you, 'cause you found me, and we hold each other's lives so easily. I found you. Being in Iowa is interesting. There are a number of different places to sing and entertain. And there's a little town not far from here called Selma. And once a month they have a, what do we call it, a jam session. And you get a huge variety of people. You get farmers, you get people who've traveled miles to go to this thing. You have gospel singers and country singers and little kids with violins, and just, it's like a family get-together in Selma, but it seems to be very well known. Anyway, some of us in this very room have gone and entertained there. So I actually wrote a song about this experience. So this will be the new theme song for the Selma Jam. Oh, by the way, it's held in an old tack shop. It's a small town, and the main building in town is a tack shop. That's their main business. Everybody brings potluck food. Well, it's Sunday, and they come from all around to the old tack shop in the center of town. Some come to pick and some come to sing and some come to listen, but what they all bring is a heart and a soul and a story that needs to be told, and a willingness to lend a hand and to clap real loud for the band as we play every day at the Selma Jam, at the Selma Jam. Well, if you get there early, you'll have enough to eat. It's a potluck feast with everyone's favorite treat. Food is served and the drinks are poured, and we all sit down and give thanks to the Lord for a heart and a soul and a story that needs to be told, and a willingness to lend a hand, and to clap real loud for the band as we play for a day at the Selma Jam, at the Selma Jam. Some of the songs are ones that we all know. Some are fast and some are kind of slow. Some are yours and some are mine, and some will take us back in time to a heart and a soul and a story that needs to be told, and a willingness to lend a hand and to clap real loud for the band as we play for a day at the Selma Jam, at the Selma Jam. So if you got a heart and a soul and a story that needs to be told, and a willingness to lend a hand and to clap real loud for the band, come on and play for a day at the Selma Jam, at the Selma Jam, at the Selma Jam, at the Selma Jam. So we haven't sprung that one on the people at Selma yet.
Is it every month?
What?
Is it every month?
Is every month? Yeah, I think it's the first Sunday. Tom, is it the first? Third Sunday of each month. Yeah.
Latest word I got.
That's the latest word. Was anybody here at Morning Star Studio when we sang on the 15th a few months ago? No. They all knew better, so they didn't come tonight for this part. We did sing a song there, which is a little bit changed. My wife Linda listened to the song. She said, "That's a really good song. You should add a verse to that." And I said, "Well, you know, I'm the man of the house. I'm the songwriter. I make the decisions. You know, if I'm going to add a verse, it'll be totally my decision." So I'd like to sing this song with the added verse that I wrote. Just felt like doing it. I don't know. This is a story of a guy who's listened to much too much country western music. So there's country music, and there's country western music, and there's western music, and there's contemporary western music. Don't get them confused. Andy sings contemporary western music. And I just kind of muddled through. Anyway, this is a story of a guy who's trying to write a country song, but his life is just too darn happy, and it's not working. This just can't be a country song. Not enough in my life is going wrong. I'd tell you I was happy, I'd tell you I was strong, but then it wouldn't be a country song. My wife hasn't left me, my truck still works fine. I'm going to a job I like, I don't drink all the time. Well, I know this all will go away, it just can't last for long. Then maybe it can be a country song. No, this can't be a country song. Not enough in my life seems to be going wrong. I'd tell you I was happy, I'd tell you I was strong, but then it wouldn't be a country song. I don't spend my time in honky-tonks, I haven't lost the farm. I'm not crying my eyes out 'cause some woman done me harm. Oh, sadness was my goal in life, I've missed it by a mile. Now stand back while I break out in a smile. This can't be a country song. Not enough in my life seems to be going wrong. I don't have the time to make a short story long, so this can't be a country song. No sad love letters, no painful memories. The IRS ain't calling and my cat doesn't have fleas. Oh, I think I'll saddle up my horse and go out for a ride, just because he's feeling good inside. So you see, this can't be a country song. Not enough in my life seems to be going wrong. I can't find a way to sing two rights make a wrong, so it'll never be a country song. Oh, it ain't real country till someone dies, and it ain't real country if no one lies. Oh, it ain't real country till your heart breaks in two. I've tried it, but I haven't got a clue. No, this can't be a country song. Not enough in my life seems to be going wrong. I don't think that I'd join that club. I don't think I'd belong. That's why this can't be a country song. Oh, it can't be a country song. I would like to end today's Polka Fest with one song, which is it's about my dad, who there's a photo outside our studio, a picture of a bunch of guys, cowboy hats, kerchiefs, plaid shirts, all singing around a microphone in somewhere in the mid-40s. This takes place in Bristol, Connecticut, however, so it's a little bit of an anomaly. And it's my dad and the rest of the group, Swede and Red and the Green Valley Boys. He is a country singer in the mid-40s in Connecticut, and he worked in a factory, but really what he wanted to do was do that, and he probably should have. He died much too young, and just because he felt, should continue to have a good, steady job instead of doing what he really wanted to do. So it's kind of a song for him, and it's a song for all of us to follow our hearts. Remember to tune for most of the song. This is the part of the ceremony where you get to meet the person next to you while they... Inside a factory in 1944, forging bearings out of steel, a man who wished for more. Weight was on his shoulders, but his eyes were on a star. When the day was over, he'd pick up his guitar. Radio cowboy, sing me a song. Make it simple so I can sing along. Let your dreams fly above the storm. Hey, radio cowboy, sing me a song. Out across the airwaves, his songs would reach the ears of someone who had faith in him, who'd come to share his years. She was the one he sang to, his voice brought her a smile. The man I love is on tonight, don't you touch that dial. Radio cowboy, sing me a song. Make it simple so I can sing along. Let your dreams fly above the storm. Hey, radio cowboy, sing me a song. Is that the music in your head or the sound of big machines? You've been punching time clocks since you were 17. And when you go to sleep at night, what about your dreams? Radio cowboy, sing me a song. Make it simple so I can sing along. Let your dreams fly above the storm. Hey, radio cowboy, sing me a song. You did the job you chose to do for 30 years or more. Could you have done much better as a Western troubadour? It was a safe but a rugged road, you knew it from the start. And at the age of 51, it broke your heart. Radio cowboy, sing me a song. Make it simple so I can sing along. Let your dreams fly above the storm. Radio cowboy, sing me a song. Years ago he sat me down to teach me all he knew, how to sing and how to strum a guitar chord or two. That's what I remember most, his musical legacy. A father singing with his son in two-part harmony. Radio cowboy, sing us a song. Make it simple so we can sing along. Let our dreams fly above the storm. Hey, radio cowboy, sing me a song. Radio cowboy, sing me a song. Make it simple so I can sing along. Let our dreams fly above the storm. Hey, radio cowboy, sing me a song. Thank you. It gives me very great pleasure to welcome back to Fairfield a friend of ours, a great singer, songwriter, poet, playwright, and road warrior who's going from venue to venue across this great land, telling stories, singing songs. Let's give a big Fairfield welcome to Mr. Andy Wilkinson.
Gosh, thanks. It was sure fun getting to hear Jeffrey play. Thanks, Jeffrey. And what I liked best, I guess, was that he was singing songs that he had written. And for those of us who travel around doing that, it's really refreshing to hear that there are other people doing it too. It's always depressing when you go someplace and you play your songs and people say, "Boy, that was good. Do you know any Garth Brooks?" So, with all that talk about singing one's own songs, I'm going to start off with a song that I didn't write, but that I would have if I'd been there when it was happening. It's a very interesting song. It's I'm doing it in memory of my dear friend Buck Ramsey, who was he was here with me the last time I was in Fairfield. Gosh, Paul, has it been 4 years or 3 years? 3. Buck has since passed away, but he was one of the great lights of Western music and poetry. And as Jeffrey was so astute to make the distinction of Western as opposed to country Western. And now we have the mood lights. So this song is really a great song, and it's an old folk song, and I got to hear the first time when Buck sang it for me. But it's much older than a cowboy song. It started off in Scotland a couple hundred years ago, and it's an interesting tune. You may someday be called on to be able to do a song that's a combination love song and geography lesson. You never know, but I will promise you, if you have to do that, this is probably the only song that'll fill the bill. And it's just a very basic story. A young man meets his sweetheart on the banks of a river in Scotland, and they woo and pledge their truthfulness to one another on the banks of that river. And then, you know what happens to love? Well, eventually she leaves him on the banks of the same river. And so in the song, he's telling this story to the river, and he vows in spite never to go back to the river again. as if the girl or the river really cared, right? But in telling the story, he names all of the rivers in Scotland. And so when this song came across the United States with the Scots immigrants, the song came with them, the same story, but as they moved across the United States, each place where they moved, they changed the names of the rivers to the place where they lived. And by the time it got to Texas, it came in the persons of Scots cowpunchers. And so this is an old Scots song with cowboy lyrics from when Scots settled in the northern part of Texas for the trail drives. It's called the Texas River Song. We crossed the white Pecos, we forded the Nueces, we swam the Guadalupe, walked down the Brazos, Red River unrusty, the Wichita clear, but it's down by the Brazos that I courted my dear, singing Lila, Lily, give me your hand, Lila, Lily, give me your hand, Lila, Lily, give me your hand. There's many a river that waters this land. Sweet Angelina goes gleaming and gliding, crooked Colorado, weaving and winding, the slow San Antonio course is a plain, but I never will ride by that Brazos again, singing Lila, Lily, give me your hand, Lila, Lily, give me your hand, Lila, Lily, give me your hand. There's many a river that waters this land. She hugged me, she kissed me, she called me her dandy, for the Trinity's muddy, the Tees is quicksandy. She hugged me, she kissed me, called me her own, but it's down by the Brazos she left me alone, singing Lila, Lily, ride, ride along, Lila, Lily, ride, ride along, Lila, Lily, ride, ride along. For my Brazos River sweetheart has left me and gone. And girls on Little River, they're plump and they're pretty, on the sea vine and the sulphur, many a beauty along the old Canadian, girls by the score, but I never will ride by that Brazos no more, singing Lila, Lily, ride, ride along, Lila, Lily, ride, ride along, Lila, Lily, ride, ride along. For my Brazos River sweetheart has left me and gone, singing Lila, Lily, give me your hand, Lila, Lily, give me your hand, Lila, Lily, give me your hand. For the Trinity's muddy and the Brazos quicksand. Thank you. Now the Brazos River, that's a good place to start. I'll tell you something about where I'm from. I live on Llano Estacado, which for those of you, since we started off also with trivia and rivers, let's work with that a little bit. For trivia, the Llano Estacado where I live is the largest flat landmass on Earth. We've never been able to get the Chamber of Commerce interested in that as a, you know, like for bumper stickers or, so, you know, truth doesn't always sell in advertising. The Llano Estacado is this huge butte that is flat. It's a couple of 100 miles long and about 150 miles wide, more or less, and it stands about 2,000 feet above the rest of Texas. We're at 3,500 feet in elevation, and so it's like this very long and wide and very flat mountain. And at one time, the Brazos River, the prehistoric Brazos River, went right through the Llano Estacado, but the Pecos River, which we all hate because it's full of salt and it cut down through the mountains of Colorado and took the water that was the old Brazos and formed the Pecos River Valley, which also, well, we don't want to go into all that geology, but nevertheless, so now the Brazos River, instead of coming through Llano Estacado, it begins on the Llano. Now the Brazos has the most beautiful name of any river in Texas, and it's the most Texan of rivers. It's the only river that starts in Texas and stays in Texas all the way to the ocean. Now, Brazos, beautiful name. Do I detect a little disbelief? Well, it's because when we call it the Brazos, we're shortening the name, and we're saying it with our West Texas accent, which makes it sound a little like this. The Brazos is short for the Spanish name of the river, which is this, El Río de los Brazos del Dio, which means the river of the arms of God. Come with me where the Brazos runs. The hour is late, but the night's still young. We can be together, me and you. We've got a little bit of talking to do. Because falling in love ain't a simple thing, it's complicated, so I'll explain. Love is a river that has no sea, running through you, carrying me. Love is the reason when you don't know why. Love is the lesson in the lullaby. Love is the angel's alibi. Love is the river that never runs dry. I love you, now don't be scared to travel this river like an answered prayer. The river of love has got no wind, and the river never fears where the traveler's been. Love is the reason when you don't know why. Love is the lesson in the lullaby. Love is the angel's alibi. Love is the river that never runs dry. So let's pitch a blanket on the prairie side, on the banks of the river of the arms of God. Wind in our hair, stars up above. Here's everything we need to know about love. Love is the reason when you don't know why. Love is the lesson in the lullaby. Love is the angel's alibi. Love is the river that never runs dry. Love is the river that never runs dry. Love is the river that never runs dry. Thank you. So that's a song I wrote about my part of the Brazos River, where it begins, up on the Llano Estacado. I mentioned the Pecos River a few moments ago, so I think I'll sing a song about the Pecos. I have this distant uncle, I mean very distant. He was born in 1836 and died in 1929, so even though I look like I might be old enough to know him, I really didn't. But he was a very famous person in the history of the West. His name was Charles Goodnight, and my grandmother, who's still alive, she's 96, but still alive, and my great-grandmother spent their girlhood summers on his ranch, their Uncle Charlie Goodnight's ranch, and so I grew up listening to their stories, and I felt like I knew him. So I've written a lot about him. He's a very interesting character and lived in a very interesting time and did very interesting things. One of the things that he did was create a cattle drive trail called the Goodnight-Loving Trail, which started in an area, if you have your mental maps turned over to the page of North Texas, it started just north and west of Fort Worth in an area that was called in those years the Cross Timbers, because there was a stretch of timber that came down through Oklahoma and into the northern part of Texas, and there was plains to either side of it, Cross Timbers. That's where Charlie Goodnight grew up, and so in the 1860s, right after the Civil War, he thought he would like to drive some cattle north to where they could be sold, because after the Civil War, Texas had this problem. First of all, it was in Reconstruction, so there were legal requirements as to what jobs you could hold and what you couldn't if you were an adult male. And all the farms had sort of gone to seed while the men were off fighting the war. But there was this great natural resource that had developed during the war, and what it was were wild cattle, because when the men were off fighting, all the cattle raising that had been husbandry, where the cattle had been tended before the war, had been let go, and so these cattle had run loose, and they had gone forth and multiplied. And so Texas had all these longhorn beeves that were literally nobodies. Nobody owned them. So several people, Charlie Goodnight included, thought, what can we do with these beef cattle? There are not enough people in Texas to sell them to. You know, we have all that we need. So they thought, well, we'll drive them till we find a railhead, and then we'll load them up and we can sell them in Chicago. So that's what they did. Now, Goodnight wanted to sell his in Denver, but instead of going from the northwest part of just around Fort Worth straight up across my country, Llano Estacado, up to Denver, which is how we do it today on the highway, he went around the Llano, he went south below it and went across Centralia Draw, 90 miles of desert, crossed the Pecos River at Horsehead Crossing, and turned and followed the Pecos north. And he did that because no one knew where there was any water on the Llano, and also because the Llano was full of Comanche. So this is a story of the very first time that he crossed the Pecos River, which he hated. He called it the graveyard of the cowman's hopes. It was full of salt, as I said earlier, and the banks were lined with quicksand. But it was the only water out there. In fact, there was so much salt in the river that the story goes that old cowpunchers who worked in the Pecos River Valley used to carry salt in their saddlebags just in case they ever ran across fresh water so they could season it to taste. I don't know if it's true or not. We rounded up our longhorn beeves, fat and pretty as you please, drove them south along Fort Phantom Hill. Shot the gap at Buffalo, we turned them west across the Concho, where we stopped to let them drink their fill. We'd let them take all day to drink their fill. 'Cause the desert, she's wide and dry, the sands are full of alkali, Centralia Draw is 90 miles of hell. Day and night time in the saddle with a herd of thirsty cattle, we knew they'd stampede if they caught the smell of the damn fool Pecos River. Pony, horse, and cattle killer, crooked as a rattlesnake she flows. Devil's blood is in her waters, quicksand is on her borders, graveyard of the cowman's hopes. And sure enough, past Castle Gap, the herd caught wind of something wet. Strong smell of the river drove them wild. With rolling eyes and swollen tongues, them longhorns they began to run for Horsehead Crossing, near a dozen miles. For the crossing down near a dozen miles. And the dust boiled like a thundercloud while the cowhands yelled and cursed the cows, trying to turn the herd or slow them down. But it's easier to rope the wind than to hold them when they've got the scent. They'd never stop until they drank or drowned. In the damn fool Pecos River, pony, horse, and cattle killer, crooked as a rattlesnake she flows. Devil's blood is in her waters, quicksand is on her borders, graveyard of the cowman's hopes. In the stillness that dying brings, time slowed down like a dream. Seemed we watched them fall one at a time. Stacked like cordwood in the mud, and the water foam with spit and blood, 'cause the banks were steep and difficult to climb. 'Cause the banks were steep and difficult to climb. We'd started with 2,000 head, and now there's 700 dead, killed by the river or the thirst, by the summer sun that baked them dry, by the quicksand or the alkali. But I just can't tell you which of them is worse. And the damn fool Pecos River, pony, horse, and cattle killer, crooked as a rattlesnake she flows. Devil's blood is in her waters, quicksand is on her borders, graveyard of the cowman's hopes. Graveyard of the cowman's hopes. Thank you.
A little more guitar. Just a little bit more.
Jeffrey just came up and said the thing that we all want to hear most when we're a musician: turn it up. No, actually, what we want to hear most is the check didn't bounce. That's the... I really don't like all this stuff. I'd much rather just be able to play acoustically, but then only about 5 of us could do it. You know, that's the drawback to that. So you spend all this money on this stuff so that it will sound like you're not doing all this stuff. Let's see, last week I was on the Salt Fork of the Red River, on the very northern edge of the Llano Estacado. This is the Walters Ranch. We're recording an album for a friend of mine, Karen Walters, who's a terrific fiddle player. Now, they have this beautiful ranch. In fact, Tom, for those of you who knew Buck, Tom looks a lot like Buck. Tom's an architect, but had a car accident when he was in his 20s, and he's in a chair. And he's got that same wonderful set of round, strong shoulders that Buck had, you know, from wheeling that chair around. And he has that same beatific smile that Buck's got, too. I guess that's from whipping a chair once you're in it. Tom's also got the only ranch I've ever been to that has wheelchair-accessible shipping pens. He does. He's got ramps, and when they ship cattle, Tom gets the cattle prod and wheels up there on the ramps and gives those cows hell, you know. But just down below where that ranch is, and where the river was dammed up, and they have a reservoir called Clarendon Reservoir. It's dammed up turn of the last century, right around 1900, and while they were getting ready to dam it up, they surveyed the land and they found a grave there on the banks of the Salt Fork of the Red. Off by itself is a grave of a young cowboy marked with a board like it come off the bottom of a wagon, and on that board, cowpunchers who had buried him there had taken their running irons and they'd burned an epitaph in that board that says everything that we'll ever know about the young man that found that his final resting place. What it said was this: Sammy done his damnedest. Angels can do no more. He laid young Sammy to his rest, dug a deep hole, and we did our best to say the right things as we knocked the dirt from the shovel. So far from God and so near to a life of trouble. No more than a boy when he died like a man. We stood around his grave with our hats in our hands, leaning first on one foot and then on the other, wishing we'd have known what to say to write to his mother. But there ain't much to say when a man dies young, before he can do what he should have done. Leastways the cowboys that knowed him swore Sammy done his damnedest. Angels can do no more. We stared at our boots and nobody spoke till the trail boss coughed and cleared his throat and said to the cook, tear a plank off the chuck wagon and bring it here to mark the grave of our young companion. So the wranglers made a fire out of dry prairie coal. The wind fanned the flames till the branding irons glowed. Then we burned in the wood words we should have been saying. Down down on our knees like a bunch of growed men a-praying. But there ain't much to say when a man dies young before he can do what he should have done. Leastways the cowboys that knowed him swore Sammy done his damnedest, angels can do no more. Sammy rode hard and he never complained for 2 long years on the rocking chair range, chasing them strays down the salt fork of the Red River. Angels and cowboys work, it goes on forever. And as for myself, when it's my turn to die, I hope there's a cowhand or two standing by to pack down the dirt, carry the news to the family, and say over me what we should have said over Sammy. But there ain't much to say when a man dies young before he can do what he should have done. Leastways the cowboys that knowed him swore Sammy done his damnedest, angels can do no more. No, there ain't much to say when a man dies young before he can do what he should have done. Leastways the cowboys that knowed him swore Sammy done his damnedest, angels can do no more. Thank you. Thanks. Now it's time for tonight's investment tip. You didn't know you were going to get that too. Well, I didn't either till this last week. Somebody called me on the phone. Actually, they sent me an email and said, check out eBay. And they gave me this particular thing, and so I did. And one of my records, this one that's over on the corner back there, the Charlie Goodnight, it was on the auction block, and it wasn't even a CD. It was that book and a cassette. But they'd built it as Natalie Maine's first recording, which it is. Natalie Maines is a friend of mine. She's, for those of you who have been in a cave the last 3 years, she is the lead singer of the Dixie Chicks. And Natalie, in 1994, sang a song, a really great job she did on that thing. And so it was billed as Natalie's first recording. And the thing sold for $325. and on my website, I'm glad to sell them for $25. So, I don't know whether to raise the price on mine to flood the market with these, or just to be quiet about it and change the line on the bottom line on my financial statement. But not that you need to buy one tonight and rush out to eBay. Somebody will get wise and they won't go for that again. But I thought it was kind of funny. But that's leading up to this song, which is a song that Natalie sings on this. So it's a story about a young woman named Cynthia Ann Parker, who was born in 1828. She lived in the eastern part of Texas in a little walled enclosure called Fort Parker. It was just where the family, all the Parkers, moved to from Tennessee. In 1836, the same year that Charlie Goodnight was being born in Illinois, just not far from where we are, over near Lickfield in Illinois. And while Texas was fighting the War of Independence, that same year, the Comanches raided Fort Parker and they killed everyone in the fort except for Cynthia Ann. They carried her off into captivity, 8 years old. She was raised by the Comanche. She became a Comanche. She married a chief named Ocona, and she had 3 children. One, her eldest son, is named Quanah Parker, who later became one of the most famous of the Comanche chiefs. She had another little boy that we don't know much about, and she had, by 1860, a daughter named Prairie Flower, an infant. Now, 1860, you'll remember that date, it was the year of what? The Civil War. The Civil War had begun, and without benefit of Reuters, Newswire, CNN, or the Dallas Morning News, Comanche knew that. And they knew that most of the fighting men were leaving Texas and joining the Confederate Army. So the Comanche wisely stepped up their raids on the frontier of Texas to try to reclaim the land that the whites had taken away from them in the years that had ensued between 1836 and 1860. It was a particularly bloody fall, and so the Texas governor commissioned sort of a ragtag cavalry to chase after them, but he asked the Texas Rangers to lead them as scouts, and the Texas Rangers were in turn led by my great-great-great uncle Charlie Goodnight. They found the Comanche camp in December of 1860, just a little bit before Christmas Eve, on the banks of the Pease River, where Mule Creek strikes the Pease River, and they surprised them early in the morning as they were packing up. And as the Comanche warriors always did in those situations, they mounted their horses and rode off away from the camp to lure the fighters away from the camp so that the women and children could continue to pack up and leave. And the Rangers followed them and engaged them in a fight on the plain some mile or two away. Now this cavalry, though, were green. They'd never fought before, and many of them were relatives of the settlers that had been killed in the fall by these same Comanche. And so they were out for vengeance more than anything. And so while the Rangers were out fighting the braves, you know, the ones who could fight back, the cavalry rode through the camp, and they killed everyone in the camp. The old men, the children, the women, the dogs, the horses. And when they came to Cynthia Ann, though, they recognized that this woman had been an Anglo. Now, she wasn't going to give up. She jumped on a horse and rode off. They had to chase her down, brought her back, and against her will brought her back to her people in East Texas, dressed her up in the contemporary clothing, and took her around and sort of showed her off. The Rangers, it's interesting to note that the Rangers, among them my uncle, argued for her release, saying, she's no more one of us, she's one of them, and she should be let go. But even in 1860, generals knew what sound bites were, and they weren't about to let this woman be let free. Within a couple of years, she had died, and the story goes that she died just from heartbreak. But before she died, she was interviewed by a newspaper reporter, a person who asked her what she missed most about the Comanche way of life. And she said she missed living in a teepee because in the summer you'd roll the edges of the teepee up and it would ventilate through, it would be cool and keep the rain off of you. In the winter you'd let those sides down and build a fire in the center and it would be warm. And the log cabin that she was living in East Texas was, the wind blew through it in the wintertime and froze you, but in the summer it had no windows. It was stifling hot, you know, it's just backward. And they said, well, what do you hate most about being back with the whites? And she said, I hate wearing the white women's clothes. That sort of puzzled me at first until I started doing a little research and realized that in 1860, early 1860s, white women wore wool, and they wore it year-round, and they wore lots of petticoats under it. Now, East Texas, well, let's just say that this part of Iowa seems like the cool mountain meadows of Colorado compared to East Texas in the summer. I can't imagine wool. So here's Cynthia Ann's story. So you have to imagine not only that I'm Cynthia Ann, this is in the voice of Cynthia Ann, but if you listen to the record, you have to also imagine that I'm a young, blonde-headed, short, beautiful, and very rich country western singing star. In the moon you call December, on the river you call the Pease. It was cold and I remember we had just packed up to leave, when a mounted line of soldiers a sparkle in the sun rode down upon our warriors, shot them one by one. But the ponies of our women, they were loaded down and slow, with our lodge poles and equipment and the meat of our buffalo. So the cowards of your cavalry, when all the fight was o'er, kill the women and their babies, except for me and Prairie Flower. The white man's liberation took me from my home for the prison of his houses and his white women's clothes. You could see my hair was flaxen, you could see my eyes were blue. See my skin was white and ashen, or you would have shot me too. But you could not see the baby that I cradled in my robes. A small red-skinned Comanche, the color of my soul. The white man's liberation took me from my home, for the prison of his houses and his white women's clothes. Dressed up for your amusement in your used and second hands, you parade me through your settlements and you call me Cynthia Ann. In your walls I'm suffocating where the wind never blows, and my heart is strangulating in your white women's clothes. The white man's liberation took me from my home, for the prison of his houses and his white women's clothes. The white man's liberation took me from my home, for the prison of his houses and his white women's clothes. Now, I mentioned Quanah Parker, her son, Prairie Flower, incidentally, also died. She died within a few months. Her mother's grief was too great to sustain her. The same Charlie Goodnight in 1877 moved back to Texas from Colorado, where he'd established a ranch, and he moved into the Balladeer Canyon. If you've never seen the Balladeer, if you're ever in that vicinity of Texas, you really need to stop and see it. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous place. And the Native American, the Comanche and the Kiowa who lived there believed that it had magic to it, and I can't disagree with them when I'm there myself. Goodnight established his ranch there, the J.A. Ranch. In fact, the ranch is still there. Goodnight's partners, descendants, still own it. They moved the buffalo out of the canyon and put their longhorn herd down there, and they started losing a few longhorns, and the word got around that Quanah had left the reservation, which he had just come onto the year before in 1876. Now, Quanah had established quite a reputation as a warrior. He had been in the Battle of Blanco Canyon, and several cavalry men and several braves on Quanah's side swore that he had been shot, but he wasn't wounded or killed. And so this sort of mystique built up around him that he was invincible to bullets. Goodnight wanted to meet with him if he was out there and see if they could strike a deal to live together, and they met and became friends for the rest of their lives. This is a story of that very first meeting. It happened at a place near where Goodnight's first cabin was, and that just happens to be below the south rim, where my daughter is at this very minute as a counselor for a bunch of little kids at a youth camp. So this is for my daughter Emily. It was cold in the Paladuro in the winter of '78. From the reservation in the territories come a rumor of an escape. The cowhands grew uneasy 'cause we was losing bees. It was feared it was Comanche, Quanah Parker in the lead. We remembered Blanco Canyon and the Battle of Adobe Walls, and a young Comanche warrior who could not be killed at all. So I thought it best to parley with the leader of their band, strike ourselves a treaty to live together on the land. When I rode out to make my call, I knew right where he'd been. I felt his magic in the canyon walls, his power in the wind. Locating their encampment, I stood down off my mount. I asked to see their capitan as the warriors circled round. This young man, tall and handsome, fixed me in his sights, saying, "Red men call me Quanah, Parker, say the white." As a few snowflakes began to fall upon the cedar glen, I felt his magic in the canyon walls, his power in the wind. He had not come a-begging, though his fortunes, they were low. I could see his tribe was hungry for want of the buffalo. So I promised that I'd provision every week a couple of beeves for the ranchers and Comanche to abide their time in peace. The words he spoke were straight and tall, his heart feared not of men. I felt his magic in the canyon walls, his power in the wind. I stood behind our bargain. Quanah did what he had said, but I never knew a promise broken by a man whose skin was red. And as an old man now I tremble when I stand upon the rim, looking down into the canyon, remembering what had been. There's an eagle soaring over all as I watch him wheel and spin. I feel his magic in the canyon walls, his power in the wind. His magic's in the canyon walls, his power's in the wind. Thank you. One thing I notice about Iowa is, other than you've got way too much green up here. Until I was a big kid, I thought the natural color of grass was yellow. I didn't know it was supposed to be green. I thought golf courses, I knew they had somebody that came out at night and painted it, because the grass I grew up with was yellow most of the year. A lot of green here. But the other thing that is I always find very interesting is that houses in towns in Iowa don't have fences around them. And when you get out in Texas and West, the first thing people do after they put a house up is put a tree around it. I mean, a fence around it. And the next thing is they plant a tree. Of course, you don't have to do that either. You do part of that green is trees. But fences, no fences around the houses, and I think it's very nice. They all look so neat. Iowa is, I don't have to tell you this, maybe I do, because you live here, you don't get to see the rest of the country, but Iowa is the cleanest place in America. It is, and I'm not saying that to make fun. towns here are just beautiful. Well, we didn't used to have fences either. This is a story about the very first time that fences came to Texas. It's in the summer of 1886. Now, to lay a little background for the story, there's a chief of the Taos Pueblo Indians. All the pueblos there in northern New Mexico, that each tribe is a separate tribe. Each pueblo is a separate tribe of Indians. They have different languages. In fact, some of them can't even speak one to the other without going through a third language that they can both understand. Taos is one of the larger of the pueblos, and there's a chief there named Standing Deer. Standing Deer and my great uncle Charlie Goodnight had become pals when he was traveling on the Goodnight Trail, and they stayed friends the rest of their lives. In the spring, Standing Deer would leave Taos, and he'd strike out across the plains of eastern New Mexico, and that same Llano Estacado I was telling you about, flat, treeless, no mountains, no ravines really to speak of, nothing to give you an idea of how to get someplace. But he navigated by the stars, by the moon, and by the sun during the day. And he'd travel all across it. He'd stop when he got to the J.A. Ranch, stay a few days with Charlie Goodnight, and then he'd go on to Oklahoma. He'd stay there in the Indian territories all summer, visiting with friends he'd made in the Kiowa and the Comanche and the Cherokee reservations. And in the fall, he'd turn around and retrace his steps through that flat, level, sightless plain. Now this year, 1886, he did the same thing. He started off in the spring, made that trip, visited Charlie Goodnight, and went on to spend the summer in Oklahoma. And he turned around to come back, but like I said, that was the summer that barbed wire came to the Texas plains. The Frying Pan Ranch, which was owned by the Gliddens, who made the wire, were the first to put it up. Goodnight and the other ranchers saw that it was inevitable, so they started stringing it up too. J.A. put it up, the T-Anchor put it up, the L.S. put it up. The XIT that year and the next put up 5,000 miles of wire. That's a lot of wire. Even so, you know, when you and I look at a barbed wire fence, it's 5 strands of wire and separated by almost a foot apart, and they're on these skinny posts. If you squint your eyes hardly at all, you can't even see the wire. You can't see the fence. But it must look like the Great Wall of China to Standing Deer, because when he came back and here was this stuff across the plains that he had been traveling all these many years, he got lost. He couldn't figure out how to get home. So he stopped in this town of Clarendon. It's a town settled by religious people, not frontiers people. They thought he was an escaped Comanche. And they seized him and they were going to hang him, and he kept asking for his friend. But Standing Deer could only speak Taos or Spanish, neither of which the Clarendon folk understood, and he asked for his friend Charlie Goodnight. Buenas noches. Now, just out of luck, Charlie Goodnight had come to town that day, and he saw this commotion. Went over to investigate and saw they were getting ready to have a lynching party, and it was his friend Standing Deer they were going to lynch. So he rescued him, explained him to the townspeople, and then he got him off to the side and he started chewing him out in Spanish up one side, down the other. What in the world are you doing here? You know better than to come to Clarendon. These people don't understand you. You'd have gotten killed today if I hadn't been here. What were you doing in town? Standing Deer said, well, I was asking for directions back to Taos. Goodnight said, you can't need directions back to Taos. This is your country. You know it like the back of your hand. Why would you have to ask for help finding your way? He said one of the saddest things I've ever heard. He said, barbed wire. Barbed wire, everywhere barbed wire. Mi compadre, buenas noches. Good night, my old friend. I am wandering in my own land and I can't get home again. We have lost the buffalo, will we be lost like them? Mi compadre, buenas noches. Good night, my old friend. I asked for help in Clarendon. I said, I am standing dear. But the trail to my pueblo, you've hidden in barbed wire. I cannot travel by the sun, I cannot use the stars. For the trail to my pueblo, you've hidden in barbed wire. There's only one great spirit for all the tribes of men. If he believed in hatred, we would not be friends. If he believed in fences, we would not have the wind. No, if God believed in fences, we would not have the wind. Mi compadre, buenas noches. Good night, my old friend. I am wandering in my own land and I can't get home again. We have lost the buffalo, will we be lost like them? Mi compadre, buenas noches. Good night, my old friend. Mi compadre, buenas noches. Good night, my old friend. Thank you. I started off with a song about that was inspired by my dear friend Buck Ramsey. And, his spirit's still here in this room, even these many years. And so I'd like to sing a song that I wrote about him. Buck and I traveled together a lot, and we had a lot of different discussions. We happen to be the same political side of the spectrum, and we are a minority amongst our other cronies in the Cowboy singing business, so it was good to have one another to fall back on. But we talked about a lot of things, about poetry and about philosophy, and we had some of the same favorite poets. We both liked Wallace Stevens a lot, and we liked Dylan Thomas an awful lot, and we liked Robert Burns. And it was Robert Burns that Buck felt sure was the patron saint of cowboy poetry and song, because Burns was the first to not only write in, Chaucer had written in the common language, but Bobby Burns was the first to write in the vernacular of a particular group of people within that common language. And he wrote, of course, with the language of the plowman of Scotland. And so we talked a lot about Bobby Burns. So this is a song for Buck. Oh, and I wrote this, since it's about Buck, I wrote it in the old cowboy style, which is a cappella. And for those of you who aren't conversant with Italian, that means off-key and out of tune. He was a cowboy of the Texas plains, a prairie prince who from his saddle reigned over a grassy fiefdom, yet he yearned to hear the voices singing Robert Burns. Oh, 'twas hard to still the hurrah and the shout until the poet's catch rope caught him out. Perhaps it was the lowlands in his blood, perhaps his ears to Scottish meter stood, perhaps it was the language that he learned to hear the voices singing Robert Burns. Oh, 'twas hard to still the hurrah and the shout until the poet's catch rope caught him out. But me, I think it was the cowboy's soul that favored independence over gold, and found a kinship in his heart sojourn to hear the voices singing Robert Burns. Oh, 'twas hard to still the hurrah and the shout until the poet's catch rope caught him out. For cowboys are the nobles of the earth, who earn their spurs by work and not by birth. Uncommon men from common stock are turned to hear the voices singing Robert Burns. Oh, 'twas hard to still the hurrah and the shout until the poet's catch rope caught him out. Oh, 'twas hard to still the hurrah and the shout until the poet's catch rope caught him out. I'd like to close this part of a program with a song that comes from a play that I wrote called My Cowboy's Gift, a play that's still in production. It's a play about faith, told all in poetry and song. There are 3 characters in the play. I'll probably do another song or 2 before the night's over. But this is the song that ends the play. Oh, and after I do this song, then this is what you've all been waiting for, we'll have cookies and punch. In my part of the country, one of the other differences, besides all this green, which I've got to tell you, I have to get special Polaroid filters that block out a lot of that green, so that I don't get dizzy driving through Iowa. The other thing I need is X-ray glasses so I can see through these blasted hills and trees. They get in my way. I don't know about you, but I get to feel a little claustrophobic because I'm used to being able to see for a long ways on the flatland. In fact, there's an old Comanche saying that you can see 50 miles in any direction on the Llano, but if you stand on a tuna fish can, you can see 150. I don't know where they got the tuna fish. You can see tomorrow before it gets here, and the sad thing is you can still see some of yesterday as it's leaving, and that always makes you feel bad because you know most of us would like to forget that. But one of the great things is that because you can see a long way, in the years before we got the REA and we got all those mercury vapor lamps that cover the Llano now like stars that have settled down onto the horizon. On nights when the moon was new or when the moon was covered with clouds, it was a common practice to light a coal oil lamp and hang it from the platform of a windmill tower so that travelers on the roads would know that there was somebody there. So this is a song called The Windmill Lamp. When the way is strange on your pilgrim tramp through the night of worry and care, on a windmill hangs a burning lamp, shining light that will lead you there. Far away the lamp will guide you, all the way to love that's true. Go your way, the faith inside you, it's the gift, it's meant for you. Take the gift, it's meant for you. While the windmill turns high atop its tower, lifting water up from the ground, there are lips that burn all these awful hours of the lost way, seek and found. Far away the lamp will guide you, all the way to love that's true. You may never know who has kept the flame or whose hand hung the lamp so high. But that simple glow, it is just the same as the sun that lights all the sky. Far away the lamp will guide you all the way to love that's true. Go your way, the faith inside you. It's the gift, it's meant for you. Take the gift, it's meant for you. Take the gift. Take the gift. Take the gift. Thank you. Thanks. Let's take a short break and have some cookies. Guitar player, so I think I'll play a few songs about guitars. When I popped the latch on the hard shell case and take out my guitar, my eyes are anxious as they trace the lines of the wood and the wire. But most of all, I crave the art of getting into tune. And if I listen to my guitar talk, it tells me what to do. And it says, in your arms please cradle me and touch me where I sing. Be smooth and firm when you turn my keys, tender when you press my strings. Kiss me with your fingertips, listen to what I say, put a song upon your lips before we start to play. Oh, before we start to play. I can smell the sweet rosewood perfume when I've been down to here. Low and the high E's come in tune, the A and the D ring clear. Then I close my eyes just to concentrate on the B string and the G. And softly I feel the top vibrate before it says to me, and it says, in your arms please cradle me, touch me where I sing. Be smooth and firm when you turn my keys, tender when you press my strings. Kiss me with your fingertips, listen to what I say, and put a song upon your lips before we start to play. Oh, before we start to play. Well, it wasn't all about guitars, but... I was also talking to a couple of folks during the break and found out that we shared some of the same background in the investment banking business. I know I look a lot like an investment banker. But I had a dear, dear friend that we grew up together in back in Lubbock. We met working at the Piggly Wiggly store in Monterey Center, and we were sack boys together, and then we graduated to stock boys and checkers. And his name was Tommy Caldwell. He was a great guy. He had the very first good guitar I ever saw. It was a 1963 Gibson LG1. And Tommy had that guitar, and I had a little really cheap, some kind of a classical guitar, but this was a real guitar, you know. It had steel strings, and we were listening to Bob Dylan and the Rolling Stones, and we were learning to play songs we heard off the radio. I'll never forget those days sitting around, you know, learning together. Tommy went on to college, so did I, but we went to different colleges, and he wound up being an attorney and a CPA, sort of schizophrenic. Started an investment banking firm, and then years later, after a circuitous path, I wound up in the same business, and he became a customer of mine, and I called on him. He'd moved to Colorado, and I'd stayed at his house. And one day I was going out to, I'd stayed at his house, and I was getting ready to go hit the pawn shops. And Tommy had just gotten his hair back. He had lymphoma the year before and had whipped it, but was still having that, you know, had kind of a fuzzy head. He didn't have much hair left in his eyebrows. I think he was using eyeliner. I wouldn't challenge him on it, but, you know, I think he was drawing them in. But he said to me, he said, why are you going to a pawn shop? You know, what are you doing? You need cash or what? And I said, no, I want to find a travel guitar. And he said, you remember that old Gibson? I said, I don't ever play him. He said, why don't you buy that? $100. So I did, and here's the story. True story. Just an inexpensive Gibson in a beat-up cardboard case, a beginner's Christmas present back in 1963. Now the bridge it needed fixing, the neck was none too straight. When he pulled it from the closet, held it out to me. Tommy said, I never play it much, and it needs a set of strings. My fingers have gotten way too soft. If you want it, take it home. After 20 years collecting dust, I'll bet you she still rings. Come on, sit down on the sofa, let's play a few old songs. So we played some Bobby Dylan, we played some Beatles and some Stones, trying to think back how it was and wondering where it's gone. Where's the dreams we gave up easy, the dreams we took too far? Playing pieces of the 60s on Tommy's old guitar. There was a sadness in the gift that I should have understood, but I just carried out the maintenance, bought a hard shell case. Months later, Tommy took down sick, he must have known he would. Then I heard from a mutual acquaintance that our old pal passed away. So I played some Bobby Dylan, I played some Beatles and some Stones, trying to think back how it was and wondering where it's gone. Where's the dreams we gave up easy, the dreams we took too far? Playing pieces of the 60s on Tommy's old guitar. It's been years since Tommy died, a lot of things have changed. I keep on getting older, though that's not how it feels, 'cause I'm still a teenage kid inside. inside the Gibson sounds the same as it did when we were younger, and the dreams and the songs are real. I still play some Bobby Dylan, I play some Beatles and some Stones, trying to think back how it was and wondering where it's gone. Where's the dreams we gave up easy, the dreams we took too far? Playing pieces of the 60s, Tommy's old guitar, Tommy's old guitar. Down the street the dogs are barking and the day's getting dark. When the night comes in a-falling, the dogs will lose their bark, and the silent night will shatter from the sounds inside my mind. I'm just one too many mornings and 1,000 miles behind. Oh yeah, tell you something, I think you'll understand when I feel that something. I wanna hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand. Apartment on the 99th floor of my block. I sit at home looking out the window, imagining the world has stopped. When in flies this guy that's all dressed up just like a Union Jack, and he says I've won 5 pounds if I have this kind of detergent pack. I said, hey, you get off of my cloud. Hey, you get off of my cloud. Hey, you get off of my cloud. Don't hang around because two's a crowd for my crowd. Don't matter anyhow. Ain't no use sit and wonder why, babe. Well, it'll never do somehow. When your rooster crows at the break of dawn, you can look out your window, honey, and I'll be gone. You're the reason I'm traveling on. Babe, don't think twice, it's alright. Tommy's old guitar. Thank you. One more guitar song. My younger brother Steve, 4 years younger than I, was learned to play guitar before I did, and he was a much better guitar player than me. He died when he was 17 in a car wreck, and he had this old Harmony 12-string. It was a copy of a Stella, which was the kind that Leadbelly played, with this big slotted peg head, and it looked like, well, 4 men could have rowed across a big river. And this thing, it's huge. It was huge. And I hadn't thought about it since my brother died in 1969. And just a few years ago, an old friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a long time called up and said, we've got to meet for coffee. And Now, when an old friend you haven't talked to calls up and says that, it ain't good. It's cancer, divorce, child in prison, or they've joined a multi-level marketing program. So I wasn't all too sure I wanted to go. But I went. I mean, after all, he was an old friend. And so I got there and he says, you remember your brother Steve's harmony? I said, I haven't been dang near 30 years. And I said, well, yeah. And he says, you want it? I said, what? He'd been cleaning out his garage, and I guess my brother had loaned it to him before the accident, and there it was. It was in terrible shape, but there it was. It'd been a spell since we had talked, and my old friend called up to meet down at the coffee shop for a visit and a cup. We shook and howdy, that was all, before he smiled at me and asked if I could still recall my brother's harmony. Here's your brother's harmony. 30 years dropped like a rock at the mention of the brand. A pawn shop 12-string flat top box graced my brother's hand. A flood of memories, a cost of fate and tragedy. For when he died, I swore I'd lost my brother's harmony. Lost my brother's harmony. All those years I feared it gone, not knowing where it was. Well, it had been there all along in my old friend's garage. All those dusty, darkened years, waiting patiently until my heart came right to hear my brother's harmony. Hear my brother's harmony. Tonight I play out on the stage his harmony guitar, singing songs to make my wage and wondering how far a man can claim to walk alone. How self-made can he be when every song he sings puts on his brother's harmony? Where's his brother's harmony? All those years I feared it gone, not knowing where it was. Well, it had been there all along in my old friend's garage. All those dusty, darkened years, waiting patiently until my heart came right to hear my brother's harmony. Hear my brother's harmony. Thank you. Here's another true story. from Birmingham when I was just 15. Still old enough to understand what dogs and nightsticks mean. To simple people holding hands with oil and common dreams. I wish I'd marched in Dixieland with Martin Luther King. Since then I've cursed, I've shook my fist, I've handed round the blame and left the victims to resist or suffer in their shame. While waiting on the war I've missed the battles as they came. When Richard Nixon made his list, I wish he'd call my name. I pray for fights in black and white, the lines all neatly drawn. The shades of gray get in the way of certain right and wrong. Perfection is a cruel loss. It hangs the shame on grief. Around my neck, this albatross, my blueprint for belief. An accident, a coin toss, could bring the same relief. When Jesus hung upon the cross, I wish I'd been the thief. I think we've got time. We'll just squeeze them in, do two more songs, both true stories. Johnny was a Cherokee cowboy, long braids hanging from his hat. He wrangled up on the Little S Ranch and he rode with my Uncle Jack. He sat like a shadow in the saddle. He wrote poetry with his rope. He had a light hand for the horses and a smile for us little folk. Johnny and Jack come a-calling, took my brothers, my sisters and I to the Hale County picnic, '07, the 4th of July. They had a big tent and a little brass band and box lunches on the lawn. When they raised Old Glory to the top of the pole, we all sang the freedom song. Oh, say, can you see, Johnny, why aren't you singing? Say, can you see, Johnny, is there something wrong? Say, can you see, Johnny, where are you going? Johnny, why don't you stay and help us sing the freedom song? The other men whipped their hats off, they hollered and they hooped it up, but Johnny just stood there silent with a hurt and angry look. Then his face grew soft and he kneeled right down and he sounded plumb wore out when he said, little partner, it's not my freedom that they're singing about. Oh, say, can you see, Johnny, why aren't you singing? Say, can you see, Johnny, is there something wrong? Say, can you see, Johnny, where are you going? Johnny, why don't you stay and help us sing the freedom song? He He mounted his horse in a couple of strides, and I watched as he rode away across the plains of the land of the free, till he vanished in the home of the brave. Since then I've sung the freedom song 1,000 times or more, and every time I wonder just whose freedom it is that we're singing for. Oh, say, can you see, Johnny, why aren't you singing? Thank you. If you ever get up to Cody, Wyoming, stop in at the Buffalo Bill Historical Center. It's a wonderful museum. Cody's a wonderful town. The museum is run by a dear friend of mine, Byron Price. Byron and Tommy and I all grew up together in Lubbock. Byron didn't work at the Piggly Wiggly. He was a football star. Byron went on to run the Panhandle Plains Museum in Canyon, Texas, the home of Georgia O'Keeffe, for a few short years when she was learning to paint all those wonderful things that made her famous. And then he went on to run the National Cowboy Hall of Fame. But Byron's grandfather was a man named Dewey C., a first-generation Irish American Catholic boy that was born and raised in the little panhandle town of Lickskillet. This is true, Lickskillet. After he got married, he moved to just outside of Tully and started a truck farming ranching operation. And Depression came along, and that was not a big problem because no one had money anyway. So what if the banks failed? If you didn't have money, it's a problem for people in town, but out in the country it didn't matter. But along with the Depression came the Dust Bowl, and that was a different issue. So to try to make ends meet, Dewey, who happened to own a truck, would deliver things in this truck, butter mainly, down to Houston. They'd put, imagine this, back of this stake bed truck, a big slab of butter. I mean, 2 or 3 feet around and 2 or 3 feet thick, and alongside of it an equally large chunk of dry ice, and they'd throw a tarp over it, and as Dewey said, I'd ride like hell to Houston to keep it from melting. Other times during the year, particularly in the summer when the grains were coming off, he would deliver those grains, milo and corn, mainly out to Los Angeles. It was on one of these trips that this event happened, and Dewey told it one time, and people made such a big deal out of it. He was kind of a practical guy, and he didn't like all the attention, so he would never talk about it again. But his daughters, one of whom is Byron's mother, and his wife, kept the story alive. So here's Dewey's story, and I'd like to close with this tonight, and I wish you all the best, and thank you for coming out. It's, in spite of the green, this is a great place. It was a Great Depression on a Dust Bowl ranch, fighting the sand, losing to the banks, driving a truck on the side to make ends meet. I'd leave Amarillo with a load of corn, on my way to California, drive straight through and make 2 trips a week. One night in Arizona, at the top of a pass, I fell asleep with my foot on the gas, headed for the bottom on a curve, straight out of hell. But when I woke up, I was still on the road. Someone was standing on the running board, reaching through the window, their hand up on the wheel. When I looked out into the night, I saw a woman dressed in white. I don't know, but I'd have sworn there's an angel on the running board. Well, it took me a minute to clear my head. I could have been saved or I could have been dead. I couldn't tell the difference, they both looked the same to me. But I come to myself, grabbed for the brake, slowed to a stop at the bottom of the grade. I was still shaking when the woman turned to leave. And at a filling station, I found me a phone. I asked the operator to call my home, but my wife picked up on the line before I heard it ring. She called my name before I could speak. She said, I saw trouble on a mountain peak, but I know you're safe, cause I saw it in my dream. Standing by you in the night, I I saw a woman dressed in white. I don't know, but I'd have sworn there's an angel on your running board. Now an honest life of sweat and work don't leave much time for prayers or church, but I believe in the Father, Son, and the Ghost. I believe in the darkest night you'll find a woman dressed in white, standing by you when you need her most. Somewhere out there in the night you'll find a woman dressed in white. I don't know, but I will swear there's angels everywhere. There's angels everywhere. Thank you. Thanks for having me out tonight, and thanks to Paul Stein, Jamie Stein for putting this together, and Jeffrey for being such a great sport to come out here and play, and I got to hear his songs. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thanks. Thank you all. Thanks everybody for coming. If you could, everybody could just put their chair on that chair carrier on the way.